divided between the legal government and this STC that has taken place, control, sorry, about the Hadramaut refinery and the Al-Mahara, and all these places has to do a lot with Saudi Arabia and Oman, because the first one is like hundreds of kilometers in border with Saudi Arabia, and the second one is in the border with Oman. So they are really afraid that all these divisions and internal problems are going to affect also them, and of course are going to affect the possibility of fighting together against the Houthis in the north, that with a lot of difficulties, they have been bombed by coalitions and they have been bombed for years from Saudi Arabia, but in some ways they continue to have a grip on the power in the north, and this is going to do maybe a damage to this country, especially Saudi Arabia. So that's why they are interfering and trying to make them unite in the south against the common enemy in the north.
Yeah, do you think infighting between the Saudi-backed and UAE-backed forces hand the strategic advantage to the Houthis in the region, of course, in the region that they have in its entirety?
Because there is no vacuum. I mean, if you are going to fight between you, maybe someone is going to benefit from that, and this can be the Houthis, that, as I said, with all the problems, are still in some ways by sea or other means continue to receiving weapons from Iran or people that is related with Iran. And also, not every time the coalition is going to come and do a display of all the vessels and bombardment of the north. So if you add to this all what happened in the south, it's a real damage for the big powers in the area, which means Saudi Arabia, Oman, and UAE. But there is always a possibility that they will fight between them, because we are talking about big money and oil. And if you know Yemen, I mean, they have nothing. There is a desert with oil and dates. So, you know, basically, of course, they have other things. But this is the main thing, as in Libya, maybe in other places, that if you take control of these places, so you have the power. So I hope that the Saudi efforts will bring some fruit in some accord between them. If not, it's going to be another civil war inside other civil war in a country that has been really castigated with all this.
And Matti, of course, this war has been going on since 2014, 11 years. Do you think we could see diplomatic intervention here, or is the world simply fatigued with Yemen?
Let's see what happened in the history. In these years, especially from 2015, Saudi Arabia has been bombing the Houthis from the air. So they didn't have a good outcome, because if you only bomb from the air and you are not on the ground, you are not going to have any exit to this movement. I mean, only doing damage. And this is really very strange that the South never really helped the international coalitions to fight effectively against the Houthis, only maintaining their borders, let's say, in some way. So, I mean, we have seen that also Trump and also Biden, they didn't really interfere with what's happening there unless American interests are on it. I mean, when they really were attacking all the ships in the sea, and they felt that they are going to do a real disruption of all the supplies to the world, even, not only in the area. So they interfere, and they did a kind of accord with the Houthis that they are not going to bomb the Americans. That was really incredible. I mean, they didn't get an accord that they are going to stop, but only not to damage the Americans. So this is a double standard, of course, but only an international coalition led by Trump and maybe UK and others are going to stop this. But also, if there is not going to be a real change in the two governments there, nothing good is going to come from there.
Yes, Matti Zwig, thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to speak to you on these matters. We now move on again, and the Department of Homeland Security has added 27 Ukrainian citizens to its database of detained foreigners and called it the worst of the worst. The database includes dangerous foreign criminals in the past 11 months by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, a DHS agency that locates and deports illegal migrants. However, the list includes 27 Ukrainians, more from any other former Soviet state, who were convicted of robbery, fraud, armed assault, drug trafficking and sexual offences. The majority of the citizens on the list are from Latin American countries, which account for many illegal US immigrants, including several thousand Mexicans. We move on now, and silver has surged to $75 an ounce for the first time as gold and platinum also hit record highs. Driven by speculative buying, expectations of US interest rate cuts and rising geopolitical tensions. Spot gold climbed nearly 1% to above $4,500 an ounce after touching a fresh all-time high earlier in the session. Silver jumped almost 4%, briefly topping $75. Analysts say thin year-end trading, a weakened US dollar, and an expectation of prolonged rate cuts are fueling momentum across precious metals. Gold is now back on track for its biggest annual gain since 1979, while silver is up more than 150% this year, far outpacing gold. Platinum also surged more than 9% to a record high, with palladium extending gains as tight supply and strong industrial demands lift prices. With trader pricing in further US rate cuts this year, analysts say non-yielding assets like gold and silver are likely to remain well supported in the months ahead. Okay, we're now joined by Sharad Kohli, a senior economist, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Sharad, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, in this world of geopolitical tensions, among other issues, people fall to precious metals, gold, silver. Why is this happening as of now, Sharad?
Well, greetings, Thomas, to you and NewsX World viewers. I think, yes, indeed, gold seems to be having a gold run at this point of time, and so is silver. Silver is outpacing gold for that matter. Well, the special thing about silver is that there is a lot of industrial demand in silver. The EVs, the solar batteries, and the semiconductor chips. These are the three, products which are using silver for production. So about half of the silver goes into these products. And gold, of course, as you rightly mentioned, geopolitical tensions are helping the cause. We see Russia, Ukraine, the war is aggravated. Tensions between America and Venezuela. Occasional tensions between Thailand and Cambodia. So the world seems to be heading for a war, as they say. So gold and silver love this kind of scenario. And they are enjoying their run for that matter. And of course, as you rightly said, the Fed rate cuts. So every time there's a Fed rate cut, people switch from fixed return investments to investments like gold and silver to protect themselves against inflation and so many other factors. And another important thing, Thomas, which we should not forget is that there is a lot of speculation which goes into gold and silver. There's a commodity market in New York, which is called the COMEX. And there's a commodity market, for example, in India, and then in London, there's a London bullion market also. So in all these countries, most of these countries, shall I say, there are commodity markets where there's a lot of paper trading which is done. We call that as contractual trading. It is also called as the derivative trading. So tons and tons of gold and silver are traded in derivatives markets also. You'll be surprised to know that 80 to 85% of gold and silver trading is not backed by real gold and silver, which means that people need to be careful because in the derivative market, people can take bets either way. So there can be correction. But yes, long-term trends for both these metals seem to be bullish at this point of time. Listening to us, I would advise people to please consult their investment advisor. This is not an investment advice we are giving. But yes, the undertone is bullish. And over a period of time, I'm expecting both gold and silver to be rising. So people who are wanting to invest, they should keep it for a long term. And they should do it in smaller pieces. But yes, overall, I think gold and silver are really outshining all the other asset classes at this point of time, Thomas.
Sharad, thank you as always. It's a pleasure having you on the programme, explaining things with such clarity there. We move on now for our next story, and China's market regulator has announced fresh action against what it describes as illegal behaviour in the solar industry. The regulator said it will strengthen enforcement to safeguard fair competition and keep the market in order. China is the world's largest producer of solar panels. However, the sector has been facing problems in recent years. These include price wars over capacity and accusations of unfair pricing that have hurt smaller firms. Authorities have also warned companies against collusion, price manipulation and rule violations. The latest statement signals tighter oversight as Beijing tries to stabilize the industry and ensure long-term growth while keeping competition fair. We move on now, and Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi's cabinet has approved a $785 billion budget for the coming fiscal year, aiming to strike a balance between her proactive fiscal policy and debt blowout concerns, limiting new bond issuance. The budget for the year starting from April to be submitted to Parliament early next year will total a record of $784 billion, exceeding this year's initial budget of $737 billion. The Takaichi administration also compiled a record defence budget of over $57.89 billion for fiscal 2026, an increase of 3.8% from the previous year. Meanwhile, the Japanese government spokesperson, Minoru Kihara, has responded. Let's listen in to what they had to say.
このように令和8年度予算ですが、重要施策に予算を重点化しつつ、財政規律にも配慮し、強い経済の実現と財政の持続可能性を両立させる予算とすることができた、そのように考えているところです。また、防衛力強化など、従来から財源を確保して、複数年度で計画的に取り組んでいる重要政策について、引き続き予算を増やしております。特に GX 半導体については、特別会計において、当初予算を1兆円増額しております。
We stay in East Asia for our next story and move over to the Korean Peninsula, and frustrated relatives of victims of the Jeju air crash that killed 179 people are still demanding answers as a South Korean investigation into the accident is set to miss a one-year deadline to release a progress report. Two officials have said that the country's Accident Investigation Board will not be in a position to release the interim update by the first anniversary, the December the 29th, of the worst aircraft accident in South Korean history. On December the 29th, 2024, the Boeing 737-800 made an emergency belly landing at the Muan airport and overshot the runway and then slammed into a concrete embankment and erupted into a fireball, killing all but 2 people on board. The government-led Aviation and Railway Accident Investigation Board said in a preliminary report in January that both of the plane's engines had sustained bird strikes. The pilot shut off the less damaged engine after the bird strike, investigators said in a July update that was not released publicly due to objections from victims' families.
그냥 이런저런 의심만 더 커지고 있는 것 같아요. 그런 와중에서 1년이 되고 그냥 답답함만 계속 커져가고 있는 것 같아요. 그만큼 시간이 지나면 정말 어떻게 보면 내일이 아니니 기억에서 잊혀지는 건 당연한 것 같고, 근데 한편으로는 제가 이제 입장이 바뀌어서 유가족이 돼 보니 어떻게 이런 사고인데 이게 이렇게 빨리 잊혀질 수가 있지? 그런 좀 되게 이 단어를 뭐라고 표현을 해야 될지 모르겠어요.
Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World, where we bring you the latest tech breakthroughs, trends, and gadgets from around the world. Crypto crime is on the rise, and authorities are using advanced blockchain forensics to track illegal funds, uncover scams, and link digital wallets to real-world criminals. From ransomware to dark web markets, experts are analyzing public ledger data, recovering stolen assets, and helping businesses and law enforcement stay compliant with regulations. To talk about this, joining us now is Mr. Vasily Vidmanov, COO of AMLBot. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it right. AMLBot.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And a leading compliance and blockchain analytics firm based in Prague. He specializes in using cutting-edge tools to trace crypto flows, de-anonymize wallets, and support investigations into money laundering, fraud, and cybercrime.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Very happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Vasily Vidmanov. Let's start, and also Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you all and all of the listeners or viewers.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, looking at this, cryptocurrency is often the news for scams and ransomware attacks. How big of a challenge is crypto-related crime today, and how do experts trace it?
Yeah, sure. There was a notable increase in the overall illegal activity from 2023 to 2024. I think the estimated numbers were from 24 billion to almost 40 to 50 billion. 2025 is not over yet, so
Yes.
We have incomplete data because in crypto you never know. But already in 2025 it's estimated that $3.4 billion were stolen as a result of the hacks. Interestingly enough, 60% of those were stolen from services such as exchanges or decentralized protocols, and the rest were stolen from the private wallets of the private users. It's also important to notice that in 2025 we had one of the biggest hacks, not only in crypto but overall in the world, even in the fiat world, where $1.5 billion were stolen by the North Korean hackers from an exchange called Bybit. So that, of course, was a major incident that everyone was tracking. When it comes to tracing the stolen or illegal funds, here where the firms like AMLBot comes into play, and it's done using a software that relies on blockchain analytics. So in essence, the software helps you to visualize the blockchain flows, and it helps you to map the chain of transactions. So you see the movements from the compromised wallets to the other wallets and ultimately to the service providers such as exchanges or exchange services or decentralized protocols. And then the law enforcement, once they see that the funds on blockchain are moving to a certain service, then this is a time for them where they can issue a subpoena and take a freezing or seizure action. So that's how it's done.
Very enlightening, Mr. Vidmanov. You've already kind of touched down on this, but my second question is that many people believe blockchain transactions are completely anonymous. Is this actually true?
It may seem like that, but it's not true. So the blockchain overall is pseudonymous. It's not anonymous. So of course, when people look at the blockchain or look at the blockchain wallets or blockchain transactions, at first what they see, so if you look at the cryptocurrency wallet, you just see a string of numbers and letters, right? And then you send, I don't know, one Bitcoin to another string of numbers or letters. The thing about blockchain is that all of the transactions, all of the balance changes, so to speak, they stay permanently on blockchain. So you can see all of the activity by all of the wallets ever conducted. So blockchain analytics, they actually help to make sense of this. In essence, if we look at the blockchain, what we can see is that there are two types of wallets. So there is a private wallet. So for example, me and you sending crypto to each other or to somewhere else. Typically the private wallets, they have less transactions, usually like up to 100, and also a lesser volume, right? And then there are, of course, the service wallets. This is the wallets of exchanges, of mixers, of dark markets, of payment processors. And those wallets actually have way higher activity. So they have way more transfers and they have very high volume, millions, sometimes billions. So the main role of blockchain analytics is to cluster the service wallets together. For example, you take all of the wallets of a cryptocurrency exchange, Binance, and you cluster them together, meaning that you put them together and you create a cluster Binance centralized exchange. The same can be done with an illicit service, for example, with a mixer or a dark market. You just put them in the different category of a high-risk wallet. So then when a law enforcement or investigator is analyzing the flows, he or she is basically looking at the flow of transactions between private wallets to the service wallets. And of course, this is how, again, the action can be taken. This is how the analytics can be performed. This is how the graphs can be built. And this is how you can...
Criminals often use tools to hide or mix their cryptocurrency. How do we track these hidden flows?
Yeah, of course. The use of mixers, it is a problem because initially the mixers, they were kind of in line with the main idea of the cryptocurrency, of anonymity, self-sovereignty, and so forth. However, with the rise of the crypto crime, they've been intensively used by the criminals to avoid detection, because the criminals know that once they steal something, that can be seen on blockchain, and the law enforcement or investigators will follow the trace in a sense. So when you're using a mixer, essentially what you're doing is you depositing the funds, and then those funds they get bundled or mixed together and then withdrawn from the mixers to a different wallet, not the same wallet that's sent to a mixer, and sometimes even on the different blockchain. So of course this activity makes detection hard, but it's hard, it's not impossible. And there are a few factors that can help to demix, so to speak, again, due to the nature of the blockchain, because even though the funds are in the mixer, the output from the mixer is still on chain. So you can apply behavioral analytics, you can apply the time-based analysis, and most importantly, pattern recognition. Because the criminal groups that are using mixers for money laundering, they usually choose a distinguished pattern that happens before and after the mixer. And by analyzing the inputs to the mixer and outputs from the mixer. An experienced investigator usually can find a link and then match the inputs and outputs. There is another thing that I would like to mention. Since mixers are considered a high-risk entity, right? So a high-risk cluster, and most of the centralized exchanges, I would even guess like 99% of the centralized exchanges are using blockchain analytics. Once they detect that some of the users are receiving funds from a cryptocurrency mixer, they will freeze those accounts, freeze those transactions, and they will ask the users for a source of funds. So they will ask the users to prove where they got those funds. And of course, if you're a genuine user who is using a mixer for privacy, you will be able to show where you got the funds. And if you're a criminal, then it will be hard for you. So my point is that even if you are using a mixer and you're successfully used it, then you have now even harder task to further send those funds to some exchange or service, because as I said, in most of the cases, they will freeze those transactions.
Very interesting. And Mr. Vidmanov, when blockchain investigators uncover illicit activity, like you mentioned, following the trace or, by recognizing a pattern, how is the data preserved so it can be used as legal evidence?
Yeah. So here the normal digital forensics principles applies. So in essence, if it's a private company like us, AMLBot, or a law enforcement, what we do is once we are investigating an incident, we are creating an expert tracing report. So we are describing the flow of the transactions. We're adding graphs to visually show how the funds move. We outline the services where the funds has ultimately reached. And since blockchain, as we discussed before, is transparent and immutable, all of the transactions are recorded on blockchain forever. So in the report, usually a link to like a public explorer, public blockchain explorer is added, and public blockchain explorer is just a website where you can see all of the transactions. So then from in each report, you can easily verify every transaction that has actually happened on chain. The other thing that once you're doing an on-chain investigation, always you also stumble upon some off-chain data. So IP addresses, email addresses, sometimes even social media accounts that are linked to certain wallets. And again, with the use of OSINT and analytics, you can also add this useful information to the report. And the same for the law enforcement, because the law enforcement, they also have a power to request the KYC data. So for example, once it's evident that stolen funds are moving to a certain exchange, they're moving to someone's account on that exchange. So the law enforcement can request the KYC data and other related data of such account, and then also add it to the report for it to be later used for like a court proceeding or a criminal proceeding.
Right. Thank you for sharing it there with us. And lastly, governments are now introducing stricter crypto regulations. Where do you think the government regulations and policies stand right now?
Yeah, of course. So with laws and regulations, there is already adequate laws and regulations for the centralized finance, right? For the centralized exchanges. As I mentioned earlier, all of the exchanges now obliged to do know your customer procedures, KYT also, know your transaction procedures. So they're essentially acting as a financial institution, such as a bank who has to do anti-money laundering procedures, which makes it harder for the criminals to launder the funds. There is another aspect of criminal activity and money laundering is the use of so-called decentralized services. Because when you use decentralized services, you're essentially using them from your private wallet, right? So there is no KYC typically. So I would say that the regulation should now aim at the decentralized services. And we already see some good actors in this space. So, for example, there is a privacy protocol called Railgun. They essentially allow you to privately exchange your crypto. And then you basically, same with a mixer, you lose the trail of the funds. But since they want their protocol to be used by compliant users that use it for privacy, not by the criminals that use it to hide the trail. What they do is once you deposit the fund into their protocol, they check using various block lists, including of ours, of AML bots, if the wallet from where you're depositing the funds is associated with any illegal activity. And if it is, they do not allow you to use their protocol. And if it's not, of course, you can use the protocol freely. So that's decentralized regulation. That's for the decentralized services. That's what we need. And recently, FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force, they actually published a recommendation encouraging public-private partnerships, essentially saying that the law enforcement and private agencies such as AML-Bot, they should unite forces in fighting the crypto crime, because from the side of the private companies, we're able to very swiftly trace the assets, to report the addresses. We are communicating with a lot of exchanges. We report them the illicit activity, so then they're able to freeze the associated accounts. But in order to but we are not law enforcement, right? We cannot seize the assets or we cannot get the KYC. And for swift crime prevention, this is very much needed. So then by exchanging the information with the law enforcement in the rapid manner, we're able to provide the intel to the law enforcement, and then they can take the legal action to send a subpoena or a seizure notice, again, reducing the crime, preventing the crime, and most importantly, helping the victims who got affected by that.
Oh, enlightening. And Mr. Vidmanov, this FATF, is it US-based or EU-based who's calling for cooperation?
Financial Action Task Force is actually, it is a worldwide organization. So a lot of, I think, most of the countries in the world are part of it. So the FATF is doing is that they are providing recommendations for all of the countries that are part of FATF. And as I said, this is almost all of the world. And then they expect those countries to enforce, because the recommendation is not a law, right? It's just a recommendation. So this is expected that the countries will enforce that as a local law in their respective jurisdiction. For example, in 2018, FATF published a recommendation that crypto services should do AML and KYC the same way as the traditional finance is doing it. And now we see the implementation of it on the local level, such as MiCA in Europe, such as UK crypto regulations, such as the Genius Act in the United States. So that's how that operates.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Mr. Vasily Vidmanov, for speaking to us and giving an easy to understand example for almost every question of ours and joining us today.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you too. With that, it's a wrap on Trending Tech of this episode of the Trending Tech. For more tech updates and innovations, stay tuned on USX World.
what we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Australia is at a critical moment for public safety and national security. Following the deadly Bondi shooting, the Albanese government has announced a nationwide gun buyback scheme, the largest since the 1996 Port Arthur massacre. The programme will buy back banned and illegal firearms, introduce limits on ownership, tighten licensing rules, and further restrict certain gun types, with costs shared between the federal government and the states. But as the debate intensifies, questions remain. Is gun control enough in an era of online radicalisation, lone actor violence and digital extremism? And how should Australia balance civil liberties, technology and security? To discuss this, we are joined by Robert Potter, CEO of Internet 2.0, based in the Australian capital of Canberra. He is a visiting fellow at the Australian National University's College of Arts and Social Sciences and has led cybersecurity initiatives across Latin America, the Middle East and the Asia Pacific on behalf of the US State Department. Robert Potter is a leading voice on security, online extremism and digital threat mitigation. Thank you very much for joining us, Robert, here on Focal Length. It is a pleasure to have you. Of course, let's get straight into this. Following the Bondi Beach attack, the Albanese government has announced a gun buyback scheme after the tragedy that occurred just a week ago now, and drawing criticism both inside and outside of the government. What is your assessment of the Albanese government's move here?
Well, the number of guns in Australia has been going up since the last gun buyback in the 90s. So there's a lot of good arguments for a new gun buyback to reduce the number of guns in circulation in Australia. I think it makes sense to do that. I think the criticism that it's getting is that it probably isn't going to solve the underlying problem with radicalisation in Australia. So presenting it as the only solution would be a mistake, but I certainly see buying back guns in Australia to be a reasonable measure that should be taken at the moment.
And moving on, what does this programme mean for civilians across Australia, and how are people on the ground reacting to it?
I think it's only going to impact a very few number of people. Australia already has very low rates of gun ownership, and per capita, so that is the number of guns divided by the number of people in Australia, the number of guns in Australia since 1996 is actually much lower now. So gun ownership is already very small, but getting guns off the street and reducing that number further is going to be an absolute benefit overall to safety in Australia. But I think the average person on the street isn't just calling for this problem to be fixed. They want to feel safe when they go to the beach. They want to feel safe when they're going to a synagogue or when they're going to church or going to a Christmas event. And there is this overarching fear of terrorism at the moment because the threat is real, and just taking guns off people isn't in itself going to fix that problem.
Robert, this is the largest gun buyback since the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, which saw 35 people killed and 23 injured, which triggered a massive national gun buyback of over 650,000 firearms being destroyed. However, how will today's programme differ from the one implemented 30 years ago, especially in a far more digitalised society? And what lessons still apply now?
Yeah, it means that opposition to it is going to be different this time. I think opposition is going to be more online. It's going to have a lot more international voices on it. Whenever we talk about domestic politics in Australia, the entire world seems to be commenting on it. So when you go and look at the debates online at the moment, they're different online to what I'm seeing in the streets, because every American with a Twitter account seems to have a strong opinion on Australia's gun laws. They all seem to they seem to have us not want to do any gun control in our country. So they have this massive pressure on us through comments from Americans who like their guns, who seem to be really struggling to understand why Australia takes a different point of view on gun ownership. So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be more external voices outside of Australia trying to get into our debate internally. I think it being the biggest, that makes sense. Like we shouldn't be doing these things all the time, but getting the number of guns in circulation down is a good thing. But I would expect this to be a much more vicious debate than it was last time. And it's not just going to be an Australian debate, because every foreigner is going to have an opinion on this as well.
Now, the government says the cost will be shared equally between the federal government and the states and territories. What precedent does this funding model set, and how might it impact state-level law enforcement?
Sure. That's a really good question. So in Australia, we already have a lot of federal policies that are jointly funded. So health and education are all already funded by both the states and the federal government. Disability funding is already done jointly between both the state and federal government. Where I think this is going to have a major impact is locally, if other states don't all want to go along with the ride. So New South Wales and Victoria, yes, I think are going to go aboard with this, South Australia, but it's not necessarily the case that every state in Australia is going to have the same equal level of passion for implementing the policy. So I think the drawback is getting consensus across all the states and territories, where not all of the governments have the same point of view on gun control, even if they all generally agree that fewer guns in Australia is a good thing. So I expect this to be harder to do when it's done jointly.
Critics argue that focusing on gun control risks diverting attention from deeper issues like online radicalisation and intelligence failures. How should the government balance these priorities?
That's a really good question. I think that's fair criticism. I think treating gun control as the main solution to this isn't going to fix it, because we have terrorism in Australia with legal guns. We have terrorism in Australia with knives. We've had to install barriers all over our cities so that people don't drive us over with their cars. So guns are not the only way that Australians can be victims of terrorism. And there was a bomb in the car at Bondi Beach that had to be defused separately. So guns weren't even the only way that these gentlemen were planning to kill Australians. So treating it as a simple gun issue is not going to be satisfactory to the average voter. And I suspect that there are underlying issues with radicalisation. There are underlying issues with people joining terror groups. For example, the population of Lakemba in Western Sydney, which is heavily Muslim in orientation, during the 2010s was more likely to provide a volunteer to the Islamic State than it was to join the police force or the Australian Defence Force. So those are huge issues with citizenship. And that's a massive discussion, and it's a harder discussion for Australia to have about what expectations we have on one another around citizenship. And so what I think we're going to have is a government that will attempt to solve things where there's an easy consensus, like gun control, but these harder conversations about radicalisation, we can't afford to put those off. And I think voters will penalise a government if they do try and not address these issues fully.
Now, going back to the attack, it's been described as a terrorist incident, of course, with alleged links to the extremist Islamic State ideology. What does this reveal about Australia's current threat landscape?
So it shows that Australia is not alone. Every country in the world has been subject to terrorism in some form.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Jailed former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak is found guilty of abuse of power in the biggest 1MDB trial to date. The verdict marks a major moment in the multi-billion-dollar corruption scandal and could have significant political impact. South Korea's investigation into the Jeju air crash that killed 179 people is set to miss its one-year deadline for a progress report. Officials say families are still waiting for answers as they continue to demand clarity on what went wrong. The United States says it carries out a strike against an Islamic State militant in northwest Nigeria at the request of the Nigerian government. President Donald Trump and the US military say the group is accused of targeting Christians in the region. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a call with US envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff brings new ideas on formats, meetings and timing to move closer to peace. He says he passes Christmas greetings to President Donald Trump as Moscow says it is analysing related proposals. Zelensky also says he expects to meet the US president in the near future. He says the planned meeting aims to advance discussions on ending the war. The UAE says it welcomes Saudi Arabia's efforts to support security and stability in Yemen and reaffirms its commitment to backing peace efforts. Saudi Arabia says it maintains hopeful that Yemen's main Southern Separatist group will end its escalation. Japan's government approves a record $785 billion budget as Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi seeks to balance active spending with debt concerns. The administration says it aims to reassure investors amid rising bond yields and a weak yen by limiting new borrowing. South Korea's special prosecutor asks for a 10-year prison sentence for ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol over charges linked to his failed martial law bid. Prosecutors say he tried to block arrest in January by barricading himself in the presidential compound. We start in Europe and we continue our coverage on the Russia and Ukraine conflict. An update. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said in a post on X that the Rostov-Urumov, the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, reported on his contacts with American representatives, and according to Urumov, the highest level meeting between US President Donald Trump and Zelensky has been agreed on. Zelensky and Trump are seeking to align a 20-point peace plan to present to Russian President Vladimir Putin. While the allies have agreed on most items, several issues remain unresolved, including Ukraine's opposition to territorial concessions in the eastern region of Donetsk. Joining us now is Major General Gigi Davidi, an international relations and defense expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Of course, territory is going to be a sticking point in this. Do you think Zelensky, Ukraine, will in fact willingly give up territory to Russia with the amount of pressure it's under now, or do you think it will, or do you think the United States and Russia will increase pressure on Kiev in order to get territorial concessions from Zelensky?
Well, Thomas, the war in Ukraine primarily is the war on territory and gaining influence by Russia into Ukraine. So that's where the war started. And Ukraine have fought for almost now 4 years, basically to ensure its territorial integrity and sovereignty. So it's not going to offer a territorial concession on the platter, despite the fact that there's immense pressure from the US and also to some extent by the some of the European Union countries. Right at the moment, if you take the situation on the ground, well, Russia is carrying on intense attacks, aerial attacks on Ukraine, especially targeting the energy infrastructure. On the ground also, Russia has made some tangible gains in the area of Kharkiv. And that's a very, very important piece of territory, because if Russia gains a certain advantage, territorial advantage in the area of Kharkiv, it facilitates the further progressing of operations into Ukraine. In fact, that's a very formidable defense line that Ukraine have been holding. So the point I'm trying to make is that territorial concessions are not going to come very easily. However, there is some I think movement on the ground that President Zelensky has said that he will be amenable to having a some kind of buffer zone or demilitarized zone, but provided there's a caveat that in case Russia also pulls back from that area, which Russians are not going to accept. So therefore, this sticking point is going to remain. But to my mind, Ukraine may make very small concession, but ensure that its defenses are not compromised, because that is where the Donetsk area is very critical, because Russia wants to gain an edge, or military edge, or the tactical edge, so that tomorrow the operations toward Kharkiv can be orchestrated. So this is where the position is. Yes. But I don't think Zelensky is going to agree to a major territorial concession. However, small concession may be made more symbolic. Thomas.
Yeah, and of course, you know, Donald Trump's relationship with Ukraine, Zelensky, has been changing pretty much by the month as his second term continues. Where do you think Ukraine stands now? If this meeting is just in a few days, the Trump administration, of course, has been vocal in its frustration in trying to end this war. It hasn't been able to do it yet. Fighting it still rages on in the east, and civilians are being killed on a weekly basis. Where do you think Kyiv stands with Washington right now, particularly in regards to those two men at the center of it?
Well, Thomas, the issue is Zelensky is in a catch-22 situation. While he doesn't want to annoy America, in particular Trump, but it also doesn't want to make concession on territory because that's going to be hugely imposed as far as the domestic audience is concerned. So therefore, it's a very difficult situation. And you know, in February, President Trump, he admonished Zelensky and he said that you have no hope to win the war, it's better to make concession. But however, President Trump's, I think, stance did mellow down, and now there is a meeting possibly in the near future. So Zelensky will try to put across his point of view that outright concession may not be possible, and to that extent, even European Union stands by Zelensky, because if you make territorial concession, that means that Russia will be emboldened, and tomorrow there will be an effort to get concessions from Baltic Republic or Poland. So my point is, it's going to be a very, very sensitive issue while Zelensky is under pressure, but I think he will try to negotiate, because after all, the 20-point plan is being negotiated for quite some time now, almost for about 2 months. So this was going to be give and take, but outright I don't think Zelensky is going to make a major concession, but he will try to negotiate with President Trump, making symbolic concession, but at the same time ensuring that there is no major loss of territory, because after all, I said, they have lost about 100,000 soldiers in this war. Basically, it is the issue of territory, and there's not going to be a major concession, but however, pressure will be on it, because President Trump, even in his national security strategy, has said that the utmost priority is to ensure that Ukraine war comes to an end. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Davidi, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. And we move over to East Asia, and China's industrial output is expected to grow by 5.9% this year, according to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. This strong growth is driven by sectors like high-tech and equipment manufacturing, which saw increases of 9.2% and 9.3% respectively this year. From January to November, industrial investment rose by 4%, with manufacturing investment growing by 1.9%. Meanwhile, the telecom and software industries also showed strong performance, with revenue increases from 9% to 12%, respectively. Now moving forward, China aims to enhance industrial innovation, focus on emerging industries like aerospace and biomedicine, and rejuvenate traditional sectors through new manufacturing models. Let's take a listen in.
电气、机械、器材等6个行业对工业增长的贡献率达到58.2%。10个工业大省当中，有9个省份的增加值指数高于全国水平。原至11月，工业投资同比增长4%，其中制造业投资同比增长1.9%。推广各项化定制、共享制造的新模式。 打造一批服务性制造领队品牌，要让传统产业老树发新芽。
Major General Gigi Davidi joins us once again. The current state of GDP of China, it's grown, it's slowed sharply. Beijing claims 5% GDP in growth for 2025, roughly on target with government goals. Of course, with Donald Trump at the helm of the United States, we live in a world of economic uncertainty. Can I get your introspective idea about how China has behaved economically when it comes to this current time that we're living with in a world of tariffs and where trade is even being weaponized in some cases?
Well, Thomas, the issue is that Chinese economic growth definitely slowed down because 5% is, I think, possibly the lowest in the last couple of years. But the issue that one need to understand is that China's economy is about $20 trillion. And even 5% growth means they are going to add $1 trillion every year to the kitty. And I think 5% for China is reasonably good enough because, as I said, the size of the economy is so large that even with 5%, they are going to add hugely to their kitty. The second point is, yes, there is a tariff war going on between America and China. But China has been able to deal with President Trump from the position of strength, especially when it comes to the rare earth, minerals, also when it comes to the chips, and kind of trade imbalance that is there between America and China is almost to the tune of about $350 billion. So the issue is that Chinese have the policy of weaponizing trade, and there have been a number of cases, like when they had an issue with the third deployment of missiles in South Korea, Chinese did come very heavily on their imports. Even with Australia, they had stopped the import of wine. So the Chinese are well known to weaponize the trade, and they have been doing it very effectively. Second point is, as you rightly mentioned, statistics that Chinese manufacturing is about 5.9%, because in Chinese economy, manufacturing contributes about 24 to 25%, and Chinese economy largely is the export-oriented economy. So therefore, this is a healthy sign that Chinese manufacturing sector has grown about 5.9%, and some of the areas like mining, manufacturing, electricity, thermal, and more than that, in 2025, they have formulated new policy, Make in China 2025. That means that they are moving up the value chain. Means they are going to now target high-tech manufacturing and sort of even outsource the low technology manufacturing. And the high-tech manufacturing, you have the robotics, artificial intelligence, and the vehicles, EV vehicles are also making a huge contribution. There was a growth about 47% in the new energy vehicles. So the point I'm trying to make is, while the economy of Chinese growth has slowed down, but still 5% overall growth in GDP is good, and about 5.9% growth in the manufacturing again is very healthy, because after all the Chinese economy is highly export driven and manufacturing driven. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Davidi, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to get your perspective on things. We now move over next, and Japanese citizens have held rallies outside the headquarters of Liberal Democratic Party, otherwise known as the LDP, in the National Diet Building in Tokyo, and they've been protesting on Japan's weapon export policies. The ruling Liberal Democratic Party and its coalition partner, the Japan Innovation Party, have agreed at a meeting to revise the implementation guidelines of the 3 principles on transfer of defence equipment and technology, and lift restrictions that limit defence equipment transfers to combat to 5 non-combat purposes. They have planned to submit the proposal to the Cabinet in February of next year. Demonstrators have chanted slogans calling for a complete ban on arms exports, denouncing the ruling parties and demanding Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi and the Cabinet step down. Let's listen in to what some protesters had to say.
商人になっちゃダメだと思うんです、国が。今実際もう武器商人になっている企業は日本の中でもあるけど、それを国が後押しして、それで経済を立て直していくっていう風に今しちゃってるんだけど、本当に危険だし嫌だし、反対していきたい。
核兵器も持つとか言ってますけれども、そういうふうにこの 20年、30年ぐらいの間でだんだん議論が緩くなってくるし、それを拘束していたモラルとか日本の国是とか平和主義というものがどんどん壊れていく、コレイプス。
Joining us now is Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute, joining us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Protesters in the Japanese capital, where you are, they're opposing these arms exports. How deep is public resistance to Japan's shift away from its traditional pacifist stance?
The word of the traditional pacifist is another word is senior supported pacifist, because the recent survey indicates that the largest opposition party, CDP, which supports such kind of the pacifist policy, is in the younger generation from 19 years old to 29 years old. Simply 0% the CDP got the support. And another one, the 30s, 1.4%, 40s, 2.5%. So lesser than 40s, so 30s, 20s, teens. Indeed, all of these younger generation support Prime Minister Takaichi. Instead of this, the opposition party lost support. And this opposition party, which support traditional pacifism, is supported by senior than the 50 years old. So that's why the generation gap is very big now. The new age is coming, and the younger generation wish to remove all of the restriction of the pacifism. It's my current situation in Japan. So deep, if I say, not deep, senior, we need to say.
Yes, and of course, Japan has been revising its defense policies here. We've seen around a 3% hike for next year, I believe, for the 2026 fiscal year. What's driving this? China's rise, regional insecurity, or alliance pressure?
In this, two big pressure exists. Of course, the combination of China, Russia, North Korea as a one group. The last September, we see the one picture. Xi Jinping is leading many country leaders, and especially the frontline leader is Putin and Kim Jong-un. So that's why these three, all of three, is the neighbor of Japan. And Japan is facing big threat. Looks like this military parade, which celebrates 18 years anniversary of the victory against Japan, China said. So that is one of the threat. But another one is, of course, pressure from the United States. U.S. asked Japan to share security burden by raising the defense budget and sharing the security burden in this region. So, of course, the U.S.-Japan alliance is stable, Japanese believe, but at the same time, Japan need to do more is very clear. So that's why the support of the Prime Minister Takaichi came from this kind of the threat perception of the both sides, of the threat side or alliance side, and especially the younger generation wish Japan to be the more normal and effective use of the defense-related power. That is current situation. So, but we should not forget one important thing. The Japan's defense policy is cooperative with India, US, Australia, Quad countries or NATO alliance countries. So that's why Japan knows this right-wing policy is quite cooperative with allies and partners.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, do stay with us as we have further updates coming out of Japan and some breaking news coming up next. A stabbing and liquid spray attack has been reported in Japan, and 14 people have been taken away to a hospital after the incident. The stabbing reportedly took place at Japan's Shizuoka prefecture. at a factory. At around 4:30 p.m. local time, a company official at Yokohama Rubber Mishima plant in Mishima City, Shizuoka Prefecture, reported that at least 5 or 6 people had been stabbed with a bladed weapon and that a liquid had been scattered at the site. The police have said that the suspected attacker has been taken into custody and an investigation is now underway to determine the details of the incident. Dr. Nagao joins us once again. We of course don't have many details about this, but what's history told us, essentially? When attacks like this happen, or if they do, what will the immediate police response be? Obviously the crowd and the Japanese people will respond in a certain way. What is likely to come out of this?
Currently, information is limited. What happened exactly is not easy to get, but at the same time, we can guess that most of the worker in Japan is Japanese. So that's why if the perpetrator is Japanese and the victims are also Japanese, in this case, this is not a terrorism, this is a crime, just a crime. Because if this is, for example, extremism based on religion or based on the other something background, in this case, there's a possibility this reason of the incident could be the more political. But at the same time, there's a high possibility that this is the incident between Japanese and Japanese. This means that this is just a crime, not terrorism.
Yes, Dr. Nagao, thank you very much for joining us here on News 8's World. It's always a pleasure to join you, and of course, here on the channel we'll continue to bring you all the updates coming out of that developing story in Japan. Okay, we move on next and to Southeast Asia. And Myanmar's military is pressing ahead with the first phase of an election on Sunday, a move analysts say is aimed at gaining foreign legitimacy after years of international isolation. Junta chief Min Aung Hlaing seized power in a 2021 coup and has since faced a nationwide civil war. Analysts say the vote is an attempt to create political leverage over ethnic armed groups and the National Unity Government, which leads the resistance. Voting will take place in 3 phases, covering just over 200 townships out of more than 300 nationwide. The military has acknowledged the election cannot be held across the country because fighting continues. Critics and diplomats say the process is unlikely to bring stability or win recognition abroad, describing it as a military-controlled exercise with a civilian veneer. Resistance groups have said that they will continue their struggle regardless of the outcome. 6 parties are contesting the polls, including the military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party, which is widely expected to win, potentially allowing Min Aung Hlaing to assume a civilian role. Let's take a listen in to what Lalita Han Wong, a lecturer at the Faculty of Social Sciences at Kasetsart University, had to say on the issue.
In military point of view, to find an exit, to be able to identify the end state is extremely important. You know, in the last couple of years, we have seen the decline of the military junta, the decline in military strength from the Burmese side. They're not 100% weak yet, but I think that this election is a sign that to continue with the civil war like it has always been in the last 4 or 5 years, it's very tough and it's really tiring for the Myanmar military. So now, in order to partially end this war and in order to have a sort of political leverage with ethnic groups and more importantly, NUG, the resistance group, the main resistance group in Myanmar, it's very important to bring the country back to a normal state. I'm not saying that after the election, Myanmar will return to normal, but this is from the point of view of the military junta. At least something will happen probably there might be a new, semi-military, half civilian leader after the election, because the election is not inclusive. The military does not even want people along the border, people from ethnic groups and resistance groups to take part in this election. I think the idea is only to have an election, yeah, and they will take it from there, no matter what the result is. But I guess the result is pretty predictable for everybody, that USDP, the proxy party of the Myanmar military, will definitely win. They have sent most candidates for this election. And because round about 40 political parties have been barred, have been prevented from taking part in this election, we will see only those political parties, including some from ethnic groups as well, that will take part in this election. And USDP and other allies, allied parties with the military, will join force to form the next government.
We move on now, and relentless rains have unleashed widespread flash flooding and mud flows across Southern California. Authorities have warned motorists to stay off the roads while urging residents in flood zones to evacuate or shelter in place. San Bernardino Fire County Department spokesman Christopher Prater said in the soaked rain mountain resort of Highwood, emergency crews spent much of the day answering dozens of rescue calls and pulling drivers to safety from submerged vehicles. Videos showing cars and homes submerged under mud and debris flows in San Bernardino County have surfaced. Debris and mud was filmed cascading down a mountain resort with fast-moving water seen rushing through the porch of several homes. An estimated 130 evacuation orders have been issued to vulnerable homes, and Los Angeles County officials have said that many of which are in the same area that was scorched by wildfires at the beginning of the year. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. The United States says it carries out a strike against Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria at the request of the Nigerian government. President Donald Trump and the US military say the group is accused of targeting Christians in the region. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a call with US envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff brings new ideas on formats, meetings and timing to move closer to peace. He says he passes Christmas greetings to President Donald Trump as Moscow says it is analysing related proposals. Meanwhile, Zelensky also says he expects to meet Donald Trump in the near future. He says the planned meeting aims to advance discussions on ending the war. The UAE says it welcomes Saudi Arabia's efforts to support security and stability in Yemen and reaffirms its commitment to backing peace efforts. Saudi Arabia says it remains hopeful that Yemen's main Southern Separatist group will end its escalation. Japan's government approves a record $785 billion budget as Prime Minister Takaichi seeks to balance active spending with debt concerns. The administration says it aims to reassure investors amid rising bond yields and a weak yen by limiting new borrowing. South Korea's special prosecutor asks for a 10-year prison sentence for ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol over charges linked to his failed martial law bid. Prosecutors say he tried to block arrest in January by barricading himself inside the presidential compound. Myanmar says it will hold a third phase of general election voting on January the 25th as the country remains in civil conflict. State media says earlier voting phases take place on December the 28th, January the 11th, covering most of the country's townships. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says the country will keep developing missiles as he visits major munitions facilities, calling weapons production crucial for deterrence. State media says he approves modernization plans for the defense industry ahead of a 2026 party congress that will set a 5-year strategy. We start this hour off in Washington, and the White House is set to unveil new details next month about President Donald Trump's planned East Wing ballroom. The National Capital Planning Commission says the administration will give an information presentation during a public meeting on January the 8th. The project, which Trump has said could cost $400 million, would significantly exceed the size of the existing White House structure. The proposal has drawn legal and political pushback. Preservation groups are suing to halt construction, arguing that the ballroom would overwhelm the historic property. Democratic lawmakers have also raised concerns and called the project an abuse of power and questioning who is funding it. The Planning Commission has so far declined to formally review the demolition work already carried out on the former East Wing. A judge earlier refused to block construction, citing a lack of finalised plans. A full review is expected in the spring, when the public will be allowed to submit comments or testify. Joining us now on this situation is Dr. Satoru Nagao. He is a fellow at the Hudson Institute, and he joins us live from Tokyo in Japan. Of course, members of the American public, preservation groups and democratic lawmakers have raised concerns about this, Dr. Nagao. Of course, the White House is a historical property, and if you look at the grounds of the East Wing, bulldozers are surrounding it, and parts of the historic structure has been demolished. Do you think it is an abuse of power in regards to Donald Trump changing such a historic property with no check on this from other branches of the United States government?
When we check the history of the White House, in this modification has happened repeatedly in the past. So, especially, of course, in 1814, the British came here and occupied it and burned the White House. That was the starting point, because after that, this building was covered by the white color. So that's why White House has started. But after that, in 1992, under the President Theodore Roosevelt, he built the West Wing. So people start to call the West Wing the White House. And in 1948 to 52, under the President Truman, he modified inside of the this White House very drastically. So that's why the current building was made. So that's why if the President Trump try to build a big boardroom, if this is useful, this is one of the modification in the history. So that's why this is not just a museum. This is an actual political facility. So that's why there's a possibility modification itself is, of course, legitimized. It is possible to legitimize, I think.
Yeah, and of course it costs $400 million to construct, well, Donald Trump says it's going to, and is unclear about who's paying for it, whether that be the American taxpayer or himself. What are your thoughts on the funding of that? Of course, $400 million, a huge amount of money, however, for the United States economy.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts? Go on.
Yeah, just now it is impossible to identify whether good or bad, because if the king creates a pyramid, if the Egyptian government use this pyramid as an attractive place for the foreign tourists, Egyptian government can get the income through this. So building the pyramid is a huge cost, no doubt, but after that, this pyramid collects money. So that's why if President Trump builds a ballroom, big ballroom, if it is very valuable to use for the reception for the foreign leaders or the reception and promote the diplomatic relations with the US and others, it could be that this is useful. But at the same time, if this is not that's just a luxury and other presidents do not use because this facility is not useful, other facilities better, in this case, just wasting money. So just now, it is impossible to identify this is valuable or not. And so this is the decision of the US voters, and a foreigner like me cannot say anything indeed, I think.
Yes, Dr. Satoru Nagawa, as always, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We move next over to Southeast Asia, and a Malaysian judge says jailed former Prime Minister Najib Razak had an unmistakable bond with fugitive financier Joe Low, as the court prepares to deliver a verdict in the largest trial yet linked to the 1MDB corruption scandal. Investigators in Malaysia and the United States say at least $4.5 billion was stolen from the state fund, which Najib co-founded in 2009. More than $1 billion allegedly flowed into accounts linked to Najib, who denies any wrongdoing. The High Court is now considering whether to convict Najib on 4 additional corruption charges and 21 counts of money laundering involving the transfer of around $539 million. Najib, now 72, has been in prison since 2022 after Malaysia's top court upheld an earlier corruption conviction, and his original 12-year sentence was later reduced. Joe Low remains at large and denies any wrongdoing, and the judge is expected to announce his decision later today. We move on once again, and Myanmar will hold a third phase of voting for its general elections on January the 5th of 2026, outlining a polling plan that comes amid a raging civil war in the Southeast Asian nation. The ruling junta party has said that the first 2 phases of voting are set to take place on December the 28th and January the 11th of 2026, covering a total of 202 townships out of a total of 330. The party added that the third phase will be held in 63 townships. The date for the counting of votes and the announcement of election results have not yet been declared. Now joining us for this discussion, of course, these are running up to Myanmar's elections, 3 rounds of which will be held on 3 separate dates. The first is being held on Sunday, where Myanmar will go to the polls for the first time since the military takeover in 2021. Of course, an ongoing civil war with the military rule and separatist forces, which have seen countless deaths over the past 4 years. Many human rights organizations have questioned the credibility and the realism that if these elections are going to be fair and they're going to be free. Those are the questions that are indeed being asked. We will, of course, bring you all of that news coming out of Myanmar on Sunday, when the first round of voting does indeed start. Of course, the first time Myanmar goes to the polls in 4 years since that military coup in 2021. The United Nations, among other international organizations, have raised serious alarms about the credibility of the election and even the capability to hold one, considering infighting going on in the country. Now, it's unable to understand if the military leader, Hyung, wants credibility. It's hard to see if this election will give him that credibility on the international stage. Of course, Myanmar has missed out on certain conferences and bloc meetings like the ASEAN conference, and it will be uncertain to see if this gives him any legitimacy. Okay, joining us now is Professor Rohan Gunaratne. He's an international affairs expert and he joins us live from Singapore. Professor Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. We've got a third date for the election in Myanmar, formerly Burma. Of course, it's the first time that the people of Myanmar will go to the polls. A lot of people are questioning the credibility of this election. Of course, the ruling junta party has said, indeed, it is going to be fair and free for the population. However, of course, questions are being raised. Do you think that this election will give the military junta that credibility that it wants on the international stage, which right now it certainly doesn't have?
Thomas, it is a very difficult election because the military junta does not control most of Myanmar. Myanmar is now controlled by about 60 insurgent and terrorist groups that are active outside the capital and outside the major cities. But it is a good starting point because without elections, the military cannot continue. There is no credibility no legitimacy for the military. So I believe that this is the first step of many steps the military should take to restore the security and stability of Myanmar. What is most important is to give a chance for the political opposition, for the political parties to participate in the election process in Myanmar, where Myanmar will emerge in 2026 as a stable country. But of course, if military is unwilling to do it, Myanmar will remain in chaos.
Yeah, of course. And of course, Ming Young Hlang, I'm definitely not saying that correctly, but of course leads the military junta party. Do you really think it's realistic that any opposition political movements or parties get any serious platform or voice going into this election?
It is very difficult for them to participate because most of the opposition elements have joined with the insurgent groups. And so the participation of the opposition parties, opposition forces in this election remains very limited. So this election will not be a true reflection of what is happening on the ground, but it is certainly something that is important for Myanmar if Myanmar is serious of restoring stability, security and peace in the country.
Yes, indeed. Professor Gunaratne, stay with us as we move on now to some breaking news coming up next. And jailed former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has been found guilty of abuse of power today in the biggest trial yet in the multi-billion-dollar fraud scandal. at the state fund 1MDB. Najib has been charged with 4 counts of corruption and 21 counts of money laundering for receiving illegal transfers of around $544.15 million from 1MDB. He had consistently denied any wrongdoing. Okay, of course, this is a huge breakthrough in that trial. Najib Razak has been found guilty of money laundering. A former Malaysian Prime Minister sentenced to 4 counts of corruption and 21 counts of money laundering. Okay, we're moving now, and metal bars have been installed over the windows of the Apollo Gallery at the Louvre Museum in Paris, where crown jewels worth $102 million were stolen in an October daylight robbery. Currently, bars are being added as an emergency security measure, and the move is part of a broader effort to address security gaps exposed by the heist. Now, according to reports, a mobile police unit has been stationed at the museum, and 100 additional surveillance cameras will be installed in the coming months. And meanwhile, the museum is also undergoing structural and security upgrades. Despite the efforts, the stolen jewels remain missing, and 8 suspects have been identified until now. Okay, this comes as, of course, France and Paris, and the most visited museum in the world, is reeling from a massive jewelry heist, I should say. Of course, a huge embarrassment for Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that getting these and getting to the bottom of this is certainly something in the France's national interests. The heist itself took place during the middle of the day, and there was construction going on at the Louvre, and the robbers actually used scaffolding and to climb up a window, which was indeed there wasn't enough security precautions taken in, clearly, and so this is an upscaling of that. That's what we're seeing here from the Louvre, trying to upgrade its security measures in order to prevent something like this from happening again. There's been another incident there as well, which of course saw these ancient books being damaged by more poor infrastructure problems. And so this is something that the French authorities and the French Cultural Ministry will certainly be looking at, considering the cultural importance that the Louvre is to Paris and of course France in its entirety. And of course we're going to move on now. Now, according to local officials, heavy rainstorms across large parts of California have triggered floods and mudslides, killing at least 3 people as of Christmas night. These storms have dumped up to 11 inches of rain in parts of Los Angeles County, forcing evacuations, shutting down major roads and stranding drivers in rising floodwaters. Emergency crews have carried out multiple rescues as conditions continue to worsen, with more rain expected today. California Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a state of emergency in Los Angeles and other southern counties. Well, that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines at this hour. Jailed former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak is found guilty of abuse of power in the biggest 1MDB trial to date. The verdict marks a major moment in the multi-billion-dollar corruption scandal and could have significant political impact. South Korea's investigation into the Jeju air crash that killed 179 people is set to miss its one-year deadline for a progress report. Officials say families are still waiting for answers as they continue to demand clarity on what went wrong. The United States says it carries out a strike against Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria at the request of the Nigerian government. President Donald Trump and the U.S. military say the group is accused of targeting Christians in the region. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a call with the U.S. envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff brings new ideas on formats, meetings and timing to move closer to peace. He says he passes Christmas greetings to President Donald Trump as Moscow says it is analyzing related proposals. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Zelensky also says he expects to meet Donald Trump in the near future. He says the planned meeting aims to advance discussions on ending the war. The UAE says it welcomes Saudi Arabia's efforts to support security and stability in Yemen and reaffirms its commitment to backing peace efforts. Saudi Arabia says it remains hopeful that Yemen's main Southern Separatist group will end its escalation. Japan's government approves a record $75 billion budget as Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi seeks to balance active spending with debt concerns. The administration says it aims to reassure investors amid rising bond yields and a weak yen by limiting new borrowing. South Korea's special prosecutor asked for a 10-year prison sentence for ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol over charges linked to his failed martial law bid. Prosecutors say he tried to block arrest in January by barricading himself inside the presidential compound. And viewers, let's start with the top focus news now from Africa. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has thanked the Nigerian government for its support after U.S. forces struck Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria at the request of Nigeria's government, claiming the group had been targeting Christians in the region. The Christmas Day operation followed an earlier threat by President Donald Trump in a Truth Social post where he warned Nigeria to stop the killing of Christians or face U.S. military action, gun a-blazing. The U.S. military's Africa Command says that the strike was carried out in Sokoto State in coordination with Nigerian authorities and killed multiple ISIS militants. Nigeria's population is split between Muslims living primarily in the north and Christians in the south, with the Nigerian government saying armed groups target both religious communities. All right, viewers, the crucial developments now coming in from Nigeria as far as the role of fringe elements is concerned. In the latest, the United States striking down and attacking the targets in the Sokoto state. Statements also coming in from U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth about how Nigeria cooperated in the strike that the U.S. carried out at the ISIS target. In fact, to quote what Pete Hegseth said, he's also gone on to thank the Nigerian government for its support after U.S. forces struck Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria. Joining me now in this discussion is Ayanuga Olengbengapol, who is a public affairs analyst, and he joins us from Lagos in Nigeria itself. Thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for joining me in this discussion. Now, very crucial developments coming in. What's your view of the latest U.S. strikes?
Well, thank you, Kriti, for having me on the show. I think I'm elated when I heard the news early this morning about the U.S. targeted strike on the ground. While I'm a strong critic of having U.S. boots on the ground in Nigeria or having U.S. bases on the ground in Nigeria, but I know that the Nigerian government cannot handle alone the question of insurgency, and that we need as much support as we can get. And with the appointment of our new Minister of Defense, it's a new season of a new sheriff in town who has been doing a lot of work to root out the problem of terrorism, banditry, and insurgency within the borders of the country, especially those clustered in the northeast, north central, and northwestern part of the country. And the ISIS problem is something that doesn't just affect Nigeria alone, it's something that affects the entire Sahel region. So having US coming to help us, because you see, before now, we've had a challenge of religion playing a critical role and tribalism playing a critical role in making previous governments treat these insurgents with, kid's glove. But now we have a government who is ready to ensure that Nigeria is peaceful so that it can be prosperous, because without peace, you can't have foreign investors coming into the country. Even local investors cannot thrive in the borders of the country. Excuse me. A lot of farmers are, dislocated from their home, and that is affecting food prices on the ground here, and a lot of things that are happening over there. A lot of children cannot go to school. A lot of farmers cannot go to farm. So having this targeted strike is something that I am happy that our government could get US support. And the fact that before now, US have been lackadaisical. They've been playing, some kind of games with the support to our government, because I remember during the time of former President Goodluck Jonathan, it was the US that refused to sell weapons to us for whatever reasons, which I don't want to delve into right now. And that made it very hard for the government of President Goodluck Jonathan to be able to fight this insurgency critically. Now that our new president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is able to play his politics well, understand his game well, such that he could be able to, when these whole issues started with US designating us as a country of particular concern, people thought that, it was good bad for the president and for the government that we have on ground, but the president was able to use the tool of diplomacy properly to channel the energy in something that will be productive for them, and it is part of the result that we are seeing with this now. Now, except for bandit and terrorist sympathizers, the general view on the ground is a lot of Nigerians are happy with this strike. They are so glad. They want to see more of it, because everybody is insurgency today, insurgency tomorrow. We want to see it rooted out so that people can go back to their farms, children can go back to their school, and we can have foreign investors come into the country.
But Mr. Paul, would you say that one strike is enough to weed out all the fringe elements that are operating in Nigeria?
Well, I don't think it's a one strike. I think it's a continuous process. They just announced the first of many that's going to happen. And I know that this is going to force a lot of the insurgents to seek for truce, to, seek for peace.
All right. Well, thank you very much for now, Mr. Paul, for joining me in this discussion and giving your perspective. With that, viewers, we're now going to move ahead to news now coming in from Iran. Iran says it has seized a foreign oil tanker in the Gulf near the island of Qashem. Local media reports that the vessel was carrying 4 million liters of what Iran calls smuggled fuel. Authorities have not named the tanker or disclosed its nationality. 16 foreign crew members have been detained on criminal charges. The move follows another tanker seizure last week in the Gulf of Oman, also linked to fuel smuggling. Iran says low domestic fuel prices and subsidies have driven widespread smuggling by land and sea, and it is stepping up enforcement. And I now wish to welcome Mohammed Osman, who is an international relations expert, and he joins us from Cairo. Thank you very much, Osman, for joining me in this discussion. Do you have any more details than what we have on this oil tanker that's been seized? Who were the people on board? Which nations are they coming from? Where was it traveling to, and where did it come from?
Thank you for having me, Kriti. Always a pleasure to be with you. What we have seen today with the seizure of the oil tanker close to Iran's regional waters is not something new. Iran has been seizing several oil tankers over the past few weeks and months under the pretext that these vessels are smuggling cheap fuel out of Iran. Iran, of course, due to sanctions, its oil does not have expanded access to global markets. Therefore, it is very cheap inside Iran, and it is subsidized. So organized criminal organizations steal this fuel, and they smuggle it out of Iran to neighboring countries and other countries to sell it at a higher price and make a profit. This is the Iranian narrative, basically. However, of course, there are other dimensions to this. The Iranians wish to signal to the United States and all the other active regional powers in the Gulf area that they are very much capable of seizing vessels in the near the Straits of Hormuz and in the Gulf area, and that they are very able to disrupt navigation and the flow of oil supplies from this area if they wish to do so, in order to pressure the international community and the West in particular, if in case another war breaks out. And now, of course, there is a lot of talk about a pending second round of fighting that the Israelis are planning against the Iranians. And the Iranians did not disclose this time the nationality of the oil tanker, the flag it's raising, so we do not really know as of now what is the country of origin of this vessel that was seized. And of course, this coincides with many other incidents of the United States intercepting and seizing Iranian oil tankers in several parts of the world, including close to Venezuela. Very recently, the U.S. Military attempted to board an Iranian oil tanker, and they chased it near the Caribbean. So we are seeing now that there is this these mutual interceptions of oil tankers one way or the other, and that both countries are signaling one way or the other that one of them will assert their supremacy on oil trade routes.
Do you think there's any motive behind the smuggling of this fuel into, illicit activities, including narco-terrorism?
Definitely. There are a multitude of criminal organizations that could be involved in such activities. Terrorist organizations, drug smugglers, fuel smugglers themselves. They make a lot of profit out of this. So many illicit organizations and entities might be implicated in this process. And even some of these illicit organizations that do exist within Iran, including terrorist organizations, are accused of having some sort of foreign backing, and even from the United States, like the insurgents in the Baluchistan area, for example, in Iran, and it is very close to the Iranian coasts as well. This is where Baluchistan is in Iran, the province. So this could be a possibility. It's very multi-dimensional, multi-faceted, and we cannot really ignore these intersections between the political interactions within Iranian society, interactions between Iran and its geopolitical adversaries regionally and internationally, and also, of course, the actions of underground criminal organizations.
All right. Well, sure. Thank you very much, Osman, for joining me and helping us with all that additional information. And with that, viewers, we're now going to move ahead to news on the Thailand-Cambodia conflict. Now, Cambodia has accused Thailand of escalating military strikes along the disputed border, even as talks to end the fighting are underway. Cambodia's defense ministry says Thai F-16 fighter jets carried out heavy bombardment on Friday morning, dropping up to 40 bombs on areas near Chok Che village in Bante Mianche province. The renewed fighting comes as officials from both sides attend multi-day border negotiations, with defense ministers expected to meet the next day. The conflict, which reignited earlier this month, has killed more than 40 people and displaced around 1 million residents. Thailand, however, says Cambodian forces launched heavy overnight attacks on its Sakakeo province, damaging homes near the border. Both sides blame each other for starting the clashes and claim they are acting in self-defense. The fighting follows the collapse of a ceasefire brokered earlier this year by the United States, China and Malaysia. Cambodia's Prime Minister says talks are ongoing to secure a new truce. Alright viewers, latest news coming in connection to the Thailand-Cambodia conflict. Cambodia once again accusing Thailand of escalating military strikes along the disputed border even as talks are underway to arrive at a ceasefire. Defense Ministry of Cambodia has said that Thai F-16 fighter jets have in fact carried out the strikes, a heavy bombardment early this morning, and it in fact dropped as many as 40 bombs on areas near the border province of Bante Mianche, particularly near Chokche village. Officials from both sides, however, continue to attend multi-day border negotiations, which includes the defense ministers of these countries. The conflict had reignited earlier this month, and so far 40 people have been killed and around 1 million displaced. Joining me now in this discussion is Dr. Sanjay Kumar, who is a journalist, and he joins us from Seoul. He's a journalist at the Korea Herald. Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar, for joining me once again here at News Expo. Dr. Kumar, this is of course particularly concerning also because it was Thailand that had asked Cambodia to agree to the 3 conditions that it had listed out, including, you know, public announcement of ceasefire and the curbing of landmines, you know, and giving up arms. Now Thailand has gone on to carry another bombardment near the border area while talks are underway. What is one to infer from the latest set of bombardment?
Kriti, the versions of both the sides had been very different when it comes to the media perspectives, and that is why, you know, even both the sides they keep talking that a ceasefire is likely to be achieved very soon. Talks are ongoing, but at the same time, consequently, both the sides they accuse also each other. So if you ask me frankly, what I feel after seeing all these tensions between the 2 countries. Is that, you know, these borders are, you know, mapped in ink, but you know it ends in a bloodshed when it comes to implement the justified borders. So, you know, it is very sad to see that, you know, both the countries had been the land of Buddhist principles, but both the sides had been fighting. And from 1962, the ICJ has ruled something, but you know, the Thai side also considers it not to be correct in their favor, and that is why it is still a bone of contention. But on this particular matter, the particular version of Cambodian side today, we still have to wait for the Thailand's version, what they are going to say.
All right, sure. Do continue to stay with us, Dr. Kumar, as we move ahead in the bulletin to seek your opinion. Now, viewers, let's also tell you that a South Korean court has acquitted 5 former officials of the government accused of manipulating facts in a case from 2020 where a fisheries official was killed at the sea by North Korean troops. The Seoul Central District Court cited a lack of evidence against the officials who served in former President Moon Jae-in's administration and included ex-National Security Advisor Soo-hoon, and returned a verdict of not guilty. The officials had claimed before the trial that fisheries official Lee Dae-jun had sought to defect to the North due to gambling debts, mental health issues, and an unhappy life. However, Lee's family refuted the allegations. As of now, it is not clear if prosecutors would file for an appeal. And now moving ahead, South Korea prosecutors indict 10 people for allegedly leaking advanced memory chip technology to a Chinese chip maker, Changshin Memory Technologies, which helped China advance its artificial intelligence hardware. 5 suspects, including a former Samsung Electronics executive and engineers, are arrested, while 5 others are charged but released on bail. They are currently facing charges under South Korea's Industrial Technology Protection Law. A former Samsung researcher reportedly copied hundreds of steps of Samsung's DRAM manufacturing process before leaving to join Changshan Memory Technologies. The handwritten notes include all the key information were later used to rebuild CXMT's manufacturing flow. Authorities have also said that CXMT obtained additional DRAM technology from SK Hynix, speeding up its development. The leaked technology involves 10 nanometer DRAM, which Samsung spends 1.6 trillion won developing. Estimated losses for South Korean companies run into tens of trillions of won. And I now request Dr. Kumar to join me back in the discussion here. What do you think will be the fate of these individuals now who've involved in this theft of technology? What's the action that can be taken?
See, the law will take its course in this case. So when it comes to fate of these people, definitely the Korean law is going to take its course, and definitely they would be brought to book. And investigators already have been saying that they have stolen this 10 nanometer DRAM processes, and it was developed with huge cost and burden by Samsung. So definitely it has caused, as you correctly mentioned, that almost 10 trillion won has been lost for Samsung. And from South Korean government perspective and people's perspective also, South Korea is considered as a leader after US and Taiwan when it comes to semiconductor and related innovations. And they see China as a threat. They do not just see as a competitor, but as a threat. And that is why the involvement of former employees is one thing, but those involved have passed the technology to China. That is very alarming to public and South Korean authorities, and that is why they will not be losing any chance. But if you ask me from an insider's perspective, I would also say that there are concerns as well within the company too, that why they were not being so vigilant, and definitely they are going to strengthen the internal system where such incident must be prohibited and must be controlled in coming years. And that is why it is raising more concerns. And in Korea we often say that even if you enter a tiger's den, you will survive, but you will have to be about you, which means that you have to be vigilant. So somewhere down the line, in this case, the Samsung authorities also oversaw it, and that is why they are facing this huge crisis and a breach of contract, we can say, because the former employee of Samsung, he has not respected the intellectual property rights.
As far as I know, even personal mobile phones are not allowed to be carried inside Samsung premises. So there's of course questions going to be raised as to how this technological transfer was possible, firstly, and then secondly, there's also insufficient evidence to clearly say that these individuals were indeed trying to defect to North.
No, defect to North, there are rumors about it, but they are not going to defect on such things, and especially, unless the outcome comes that especially they had been going, or if, a very strong evidence comes out, that would be very unjust to conclude. But yes, as you correctly pointed that, for Samsung also it is very alarming, and definitely like mobile phones are not allowed, there are some other internal procedures also that has been expanded, and it is being implemented well in Samsung, because I also have some friends in Samsung who do say about these things.
Yeah, indeed. But anyway, thank you for now for joining us and helping us with that information. And with that, viewers, we are now going to proceed. In fact, unfortunately, that's all the time we have in this bulletin, but keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth,
Hello and welcome to NewsX World. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Hollywood Calling. From celebrity scoops to film and music buzz, here's your quick look at what's making headlines in entertainment this week. Larry Ellison will personally guarantee $40.4 billion for Paramount's bid to buy Warner Bros. Discovery. WBD urged shareholders to reject the $108.4 billion offer, preferring its Netflix deal. Tennis star Venus Williams has married Danish actor Andrea Petty in Palm Beach, Florida during a 5-day celebration. The couple met at Milan Fashion Week in 2024 and got engaged in January. Christopher Nolan's adaptation of The Odyssey has released its first official trailer online. Matt Damon stars as Odysseus with Anne Hathaway as Penelope and Tom Holland as Telemachus. The Princess of Wales and Princess Charlotte shared a Christmas moment performing a duet for the Together at Christmas Carol service, pre-recorded at Windsor Castle. And US tech billionaire Larry Ellison has personally guaranteed over $40 billion to back Paramount's hostile bid for Warner Bros. Discovery. Warner Bros. Discovery has urged shareholders to reject the $108 billion offer. It had already agreed to sell its studios, HBO and streaming service to Netflix for $82.7 billion. Paramount says Ellison's guarantee ensures the deal is fully financed. The company argues its $30 per share all-cash offer for the entire Warner Bros. Discovery portfolio is superior. Warner Bros. Board calls Paramount's bid risky and inadequate. Paramount, which is backed by Ellison and other investors, says the offer will maximize value and expand content production. Paramount continues to challenge the board, appealing directly to shareholders while the corporate battle with Netflix intensifies. And now moving ahead, Marvel has unveiled the first teaser for Avengers Doomsday. Chris Evans is back as Captain America, thrilling fans worldwide. The teaser shows Steve Rogers on a peaceful farm holding a newborn with a piano version of the Avengers theme playing. It ends with the words, "Steve Rogers will return for Avengers Doomsday." The Russo brothers shared the teaser on Instagram, calling Steve Rogers a character that changed our lives. Chris Evans isn't alone. Original Avengers stars including Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Anthony Mackie and Tom Hiddleston are returning. Even actors from the X-Men universe like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen will appear. The film promises a multiverse adventure blending heroes and villains from across Marvel's cinematic world. Moving ahead, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey has released its first full trailer. Online, Matt Damon stars as the Greek hero Odysseus, embarking on his perilous journey home from Troy. The trailer also shows Anne Hathaway as Penelope and Tom Holland as Telemachus, Odysseus' son, as they face storms and trials on the way back to Ithaca. Nolan released the shot 2 million feet of film on IMAX cameras. The film is set to release on July 16 next year in Australia and July 17 in the UK and US. Now moving ahead, British comedian and actor Russell Brand faces 2 new criminal charges in the UK. The Crown Prosecution Service says he is accused of a rape and a sexual assault, allegedly involving separate women in 2009. Brand has previously denied 5 charges, including rape and sexual assault, dating from 1999 to 2005. He is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on January 20 next year for the new allegations. Detective Chief Inspector Tariq Farooqi of the Metropolitan Police said the women involved continue to receive support. The trial for the earlier charges is scheduled at Southwark Crown Court on June 16. Brand is known for TV shows, hosting radio and films including Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Get Him to the Greek. Joining me now in this discussion is Shobana Rakshit, who's an entertainment writer, and she joins us from Bengaluru. Thanks, Shobana, for joining me in this discussion. Firstly, how do you see the allegations of this nature affecting an entertainer's career even before a trial concludes?
So, thank you for having me, firstly. And I think it's very difficult, okay? And cases like these are very dicey as well because we don't know. And cultural accountability now, as we know, moves faster than the legal process. And when a star is accused of such allegations, obviously, when it especially includes abuse and misconduct, and there's gender play in the case as well, there is immediate reputation consequences, there's regardless of legal outcomes, right? So there are brands, there are studios, there are people who work with that person who immediately want to back off because irrespective of what the case is going to lead to, what the verdict is in the near future, people don't want to be associated. So and as we know, legal processes are long. We have seen this in the case of P. Diddy or, well, the infamous Epstein files. I mean, these processes are long. And to take a side is also very dicey because we don't know what happened. The public doesn't know what happened. We as audiences can only see what the media portrays to us. You can either be in favor of either of the parties, either you are in favor of the person who is accused or the victims. So yes, it leads to reputational hazards, of course.
All right, and Shrubna, how should fans navigate separating an artist's work from allegations about their personal conduct?
See, I feel it's there's no formula to this. It's very personal. It's very ethical. So, if you say, for me, I can never separate the art from the artist
Yeah.
because if I know that a person is being accused of uh, assault, abuse, I don't want to monetarily help that person, considering when we go and watch a certain movie, we know that stars get paid, they benefit from it. And irrespective of what the outcome of such situation is, me as a woman, I can never go and associate with an artist and their art because I don't want to monetarily help them, or it is very important to ask ourselves that who benefits from our choices, who benefits from the consumption. So whether it silences the victims or not, or whether the disengagement is going to benefit the perpetrator or the accused in any way. So the choice is of the audience, what aligns with their values, because my moral ethics can be very different from your moral ethics. But of course, but the choice matters. That's all. That there's no single correct answer to this, but I think you just have to, one needs to think from their ethical and moral standpoint.
Shobna, what would you say if cases like these can change how the entertainment industry approaches accountability and also safeguarding the other artists involved?
So, when cases like these come across and we see stars, celebrities being accountable to legal processes, and cases like these are not brushed down the carpet, and media, public, there's an outrage. Obviously, it helps. It helps victims to come and speak up, which is very difficult because we know this is a very, very sensitive topic. It's very easy for me and you to just sit and talk about it, but for victims to actually come out and speak up for themselves is very difficult. So when cases like these come out, it gives an amount of strength, and it conversations around such things, conversation around uh, consent, I would say, around power imbalance, about workplace safety, we have seen these grow in the past few years, right? But the reform is still uneven because there are powerful figures involved in such cases, right? So it's very difficult for an overnight change to come. But the journey from not being able to speak at all, not being able to stand for yourself at all, to actually coming up, and irrespective, we don't know what the end result is going to be, but the very power to feel that I can actually go and speak about what happened is a step in the right direction, is what I can say.
All right, sure. Thanks, Shobana, but do continue to stay on with me as we move ahead, viewers. Let's tell you that Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle have been cremated following their brutal murders in Los Angeles. The couple suffered multiple stab wounds according to death certificates. Their eldest son, Jake Reiner, received the remains. Their other son, Nick Reiner, 32, has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The case is under investigation and no decision has been made on the death penalty. Rob Reiner, 78, was known for classics like This Is Spinal Tap, A Few Good Men, and When Harry Met Sally. Tributes have poured in from Hollywood stars and public figures, including Meg Ryan, Barack Obama, and Sir Elton John. Now moving ahead, the singer-songwriter Olivia Rodrigo and actor Louis Partridge have reportedly ended their 2-year relationship. The couple, who began dating in 2023, split a few weeks ago. Sources say Rodrigo has been struggling emotionally and friends were surprised by the breakup. Partridge had recently spoken of his happiness in the relationship and even hinted at marriage. Fans have expressed shock on social media, with some speculating the split could inspire new music from Rodrigo, who has previously turned heartbreak into chart-topping hits. Shobna now joins us back in the discussion here. Shobna, how do you think this breakup will affect Olivia Rodrigo personally, considering reports that she was blindsided?
So being blindsided in a relationship, I think it's very emotionally traumatic. It's very it's an emotional turmoil, and I think more often than not, we forget that the artists we look up to, for us, they might be just stars we watch on screen or our Spotify playlist, but at the end of the day, they are mere humans. And I'm pretty sure the scrutiny becomes even harsh when uh, it's a woman on the other side we are discussing about. So I think there can be 2 ways of seeing this thing. One is you don't care. The audience, the public, her listeners don't care about this at all. They see this just as a breakup from which Olivia is going to move on. Second is we actually expect her to come up with, embrace her vulnerability and come up with great music, because her music has always been very anecdotal. She has come up with music that speaks about herself, which is why young women, Gen Zs like me, connect with her music so much. So, whatever it is, I think in the past as well, Olivia has proven that her personal experiences is basically art to her. But at the same time, I think social media and media in general should give such people a bit of space where they're allowed to grieve. We shouldn't expect them to move on quickly, or at the same time, we shouldn't expect them to uh, turn their trauma into music for entertainment. We should not forget they are humans.
All right, and fans have been very invested in Olivia and Louis as a couple. How might this news affect her fan base?
So, I think there are again very like two types of fans. One is the fans who only consider about the artist. In this case, Olivia, that they only care about her moving on from this, wishing her good luck, and expecting better and amazing music from her in the future. And there are also fans who are like who ship their relationship, who create all these, there's social media accounts, there are fan pages, there are couple edits made out of their relationship. I think it is going to affect her to some point, because they're going to be I'm pretty sure that Instagram is going to be flooded with reels where about their past relationship, about fans dissecting her songs, about how she wrote about her relationship. But I think over the time, it's not going to affect her fan base. I think it's only going to grow, because irrespective of what uh, an artist's relationship status is, I think until and unless they are true to their art, I think the fan base, the love for them, the love for their art, it remains. It doesn't get trickled by their relationship status or their personal uh, choices in life.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Rubana, for joining me and speaking to me in this discussion. And we now move ahead, viewers. Danish actor Andrea Pretty and tennis legend Venus Williams have announced their marriage. The couple tied the knot over the weekend in Palm Beach in Florida during a 5-day celebration. Williams and Pretty met in 2024 at Milan Fashion Week and became engaged in January. Serena Williams congratulated her sister on social media following the wedding. At 45, Venus Williams remains active on the WTA Tour and is set to play her 33rd straight season in 2026. She has won 7 singles Grand Slam titles, 14 doubles and 2 mixed doubles championships. And moving ahead, King Charles III has chosen a new location for the year's Christmas address. The broadcast, filmed on December 11, takes place at the Lady Chapel of Westminster Abbey, marking the first time the speech has been recorded there. It is only the second Christmas message filmed outside a royal residence since 2006. The King previously filmed his 2024 address at Fitzrovia Chapel in London. Charles also officially overtook Princess Anne as the hardest working royal, completing 532 engagements in the past year despite undergoing cancer treatment. He says his treatments will be reduced in 2026 thanks to early diagnosis and effective care. Now moving ahead, viewers, the Princess of Wales and Princess Charlotte have shared a special Christmas moment. The mother and daughter performed a piano duet for the annual Together at a Christmas carol service. The performance was pre-recorded at Windsor Castle and aired during the Christmas Eve broadcast on ITV. They played Home Sound by Scottish composer Erland Cooper. Catherine used her left hand while Charlotte played with her right. The duet was shown alongside scenes from the service at Westminster Abbey. The event celebrated love, connection and togetherness. Catherine said small acts of care help bind communities, especially in a divided world. And moving ahead now, viewers, the Kardashian-Jenner family kicked off Christmas with their annual Christmas Eve party on December 24th. This year's celebration was smaller following Kris Jenner's recent 70th birthday bash, but the glamour stayed firmly in place. Khloe Kardashian coordinated in winter white with daughter True, while son Tatum posed with Santa. Kim Kardashian stole the limelight in a vintage Thierry Mugler gown from 1986. Kourtney Kardashian arrived in a green Saint Laurent as the family also marked Alabama's Barker's 20th birthday. Kendall Jenner hosted the event with Kylie Jenner turning heads in an archival Galliano look. Despite the luxury, the family says costs are shared equally and Christmas morning that remains cozy, private and all about the kids. That's a wrap on Hollywood Calling for this week. Your dose of stars, style and stories returns soon.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India
Hello and welcome back. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Jailed former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak is found guilty of abuse of power in the biggest 1MDB trial to date. The verdict marks a major moment in the multi-billion-dollar corruption scandal and could have significant political impact. South Korea's investigation into the Jeju air crash that killed 179 people is said to miss its one-year deadline for a progress report. Officials say families are still waiting for answers as they continue to demand clarity on what went wrong. Myanmar's military plans phased election in December and January, covering limited townships, and as the civil war goes on, the junta admits voting won't be nationwide and results timing remain unclear. India has raised alarm over rising attacks on minorities in Bangladesh, citing nearly 2,900 incidents against Hindus and others. Concerns grew after a Hindu man was killed by a mob. Bangladesh has condemned the act and made arrests. The US says it carries out a strike against Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria at the request of the Nigerian government. President Donald Trump and the US military say the group is accused of targeting Christians in the region. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says a call with US envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff brings new ideas on formats, meetings, and timing to move closer to peace. He says he passes Christmas greetings to President Donald Trump as Moscow says it is analyzing related proposals. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Zelensky also says he expects to meet Donald Trump in the near future. He says the planned meeting aims to advance discussions on ending the war. South Korea's special prosecutor asked for a 10-year prison sentence for ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol over charges linked to his failed martial law bid. Prosecutors say he tried to block arrest in January by barricading himself inside the presidential compound. Moving on, viewers, the US has thanked the Nigerian government for its support to strike the Islamic State militants in northwest Nigeria at the request of Nigeria's government, claiming the group had been targeting Christians in the region. The Christmas Day operation followed an earlier threat by President Donald Trump in a Truth Social post where he warned Nigeria to stop the killing of Christians or face US action. The US military's Africa Command says that the strike was carried out in Sokoto Strait in coordination with Nigerian authorities and killed multiple ISIS militants. Nigeria's population is split between Muslims living primarily in the north and Christians in the south, with the Nigerian government saying armed groups target both religious communities. Meanwhile, some locals have opposed the strikes by US on foreign land and called the action as unjustified. Let's listen in.
This rumor and this issue of coming of Americans has been lingering for a while now. So coming to Nigeria to do that is just to set a pace for Nigeria also that puts your leg in. We don't need to be fighting to go to Burkina Faso, go to other places and be fighting while our own house is on fire. It doesn't make any sense.
If they're intruding without permission, you're intruding by force, so you're not justified. Every country has the liberty of making their own decisions.
Moving ahead, viewers, India's Ministry of External Affairs has expressed strong concern over growing hostilities against minorities in Bangladesh, stating that nearly 2,900 incidents of hate crime against Hindus, including deaths, cannot be dismissed as political violence. The Ministry of External Affairs said Muslims and Christians have also been targeted and stressed the need for safety, justice, and accountability. The statement comes amid outrage over the lynching of Hindu youth Deepu Chandra Das in Yemen-Saudi. The 25-year-old government factory worker was allegedly attacked by a mob over blasphemy accusations. He was beaten to death and his body was later set on fire and dumped along a highway. Bangladesh's interim government has condemned the killing and confirmed 7 arrests. The incident took place during fresh unrest linked to protest following an assassination attempt on student leader Sharif Usman Hadi intensifying concerns over minority security in the country. Joining me now in this discussion is Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, who is a former diplomat, and he joins us from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sachdev, for joining me in this discussion. Ambassador, this is of course a situation that's been continuing since the last year, since October 5 when Hasina was ousted. Since then, the attacks on Hindus have not curbed, the attacks on Christian minorities have not been curbed. What really is the Muhammad Yunus government doing? Seems like only a puppet regime by the Jamaatis.
Thank you for having me. The question that you have raised is an important one, particularly in the context of Bangladeshi unrest and instability, and our own official spokesman's reaction to the same. Bangladesh is an important neighbor, and for Bangladesh, 94% of its land border lies with India. So India's reactions are important. At the same time, Bangladesh is under decompression after elections have been announced for February 12, leading to a surge in political activity. And for a certain class of politicians or budding politicians, wannabe politicians, their credentials lie along two pathways. Firstly, to showcase that they are Islamic fundamentalists. Secondly, to be in competitive anti-India trail. Both of these are out of context for Bangladesh and are not in the national interest. Yet, for the short term, Bangladeshi politicians, some of them seem to be succumbing to these two temptations, and that has led to a certain amount of vitiation of atmospherics, and these two pathways join together when it comes to vendetta and conspiracy theories against Hindu minorities, about which our official spokesman has made a detailed expose. I think acting chief executives, chief advisors, government seem to have fallen apart, and the advisor Home Affairs has resigned last week, admitting that he has not been able to contain the deterioration in law and order and internal security. So it stands to reason that between now and February 12, the atmosphere is likely to remain tense, and sporadic violence and invectives about Islamism and anti-India sentiments would continue to be rant the air for some time to come. Let's hope that the government formed after February 12 elections would be stable and would be able to come to the grips of the situation and put an end to this kind of anti-national, anti-societal behavior, because secularism is ingrained to Bangladeshi psyche and culture, and India is an important neighbor, not only because it occupies 94% of the common border, but also because there are very important economic, social, and security-related paradigms shared by the two countries. Thank you.
All right, Ambassador Sachdev, another question, if I can ask you, how do you think the upcoming elections will change the polity of the nation? Will there be any real change that can be expected, especially after we saw Tariq Rahman was back? We know how the BNP has had good association with the Jamaatis, and for all we know, the Awami League may not even contest the polls. The NCP leader student was killed. What real change can be expected after this election?
This is a good question, and I think the answer lies in hope. Stability and internal security in Bangladesh is in everybody's interest, including that of India. Nobody likes neighborhood to be in turmoil with gangs setting against minorities, etc., etc. So it is to be hoped that the current state of affairs is a temporary phase, but we can only hope at this stage that these elections would be decisive. In a way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If the atmospherics continue to be bad, and the voters in Bangladesh would be revulsed by this deterioration in socio-economic conditions and politics of vendetta and extremism. So they would hopefully vote for those candidates which can ensure stability to the country and revive the economy, which has fallen apart since Sheikh Hasina's departure on August 5, 2024.
All right, sure. Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Sachdev, for joining me in this discussion and weighing in with your opinion. Moving ahead, viewers, now, Taipei has conducted a security drill following last week's fatal stabbing attack in the city center that killed 3 people. The exercise ahead of the city's New Year's Eve fireworks celebration simulated 3 scenarios, including a Molotov cocktail attack in a subway station and an indiscriminate armed attack at a bus transit center and a local shopping mall. 27-year-old Chang Wen let off smoke bombs at Taipei's main train station last Friday, then made his way to a mall at a nearby subway station, attacking people both inside the shopping center and on his way there. Chang died falling from a building during a police chase later. Taipei Mayor Chiang Wan-an, in an address in front of a group of firefighters and drill participants, said the drill was one of 3 planned before the Lunar New Year festive season in February.
我们要确保所有市民的安全。透过今天的高强度演练，我们要来彻底全面检视现行的防御机制，我们不遗漏任何一个环节。
All right, now joining me in this discussion is Ross Feingold, but before he joins us, let's give you some more details. Viewers, Chuang, who's a Taipei resident and teacher who observed part of the drill, said the simulation was well executed and met the citizens' expectations. He added the December 19 attack had heightened security concerns, but Friday's drill assured him that the authorities were taking public safety seriously. Let's once again listen in to Chuang and other residents.
我刚刚看到这市政府演练呢，是非常完整性的，而且呢，它还搭配了这个百货公司的演练。那我觉得这个一切呢，都符合市民的要求。 因为在未来啊，如果在发生这样的事情的时候呢，他们才会有一定的一个状况的因应，那对市民也是一种保障的安全的措施。
台湾，尤其是台北，一直都是还蛮安全的一个状态。那我觉得也是要有一些，像我们很常以前有地震演习啊，或是各式各样的演习。那我觉得是蛮必要的，就是至少说，如果真的有状况的话，要怎么去应。
不管是这类型的演习，或者是。 不管战争或者是一般的危险的恐怖攻击的，我觉得这样的演习都有必要。那就是 如果真的事情有发生的时候，我们至少有一些应对的措施，可以去把伤害降到最低吧。
Let's now welcome Ross Feingold, political analyst from Taipei, to join us in the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Feingold, once again for joining me in this discussion. Now, this is a very welcome step that's been taken by the authorities in Taiwan conducting these security drills. Would you say it's going to set a very good precedent?
Just to clarify, these drills today were actually undertaken by the local authorities, not the national authorities, but the local authorities are on the front line for security of the public within the municipality. The training is important, and having this kind of close to real world situation simulation is certainly helpful, but there's always going to be a concern that when an actual event transpires, how will the authorities react, and will they be able to implement their training? And that's just an unknown. Fortunately, Taipei doesn't have, or other parts of Taiwan don't have, the same number of public safety incidents that occur in other cities around the world. It's generally considered safe, and fortunately we don't have much of a terrorist threat here, but this is also not the first time that a deranged individual has done this kind of thing, a random attack on other pedestrians or on other passengers on transit systems. So the authorities do need to prepare constantly for these kinds of events.
Well, certainly. All right, do stay on with me, Mr. Feingold, as we move ahead. Viewers, Myanmar's military government has announced a phased plan for national elections, even as the country remains locked in civil war. Local media says voting will take place in 3 phases. The first 2 rounds are scheduled for December 28 and January 11, covering 202 townships, and third phase will follow on January 25 in 63 more areas. That leaves much of the country unable to vote. Janta leader Min Aung Hlaing has admitted the election will not be nationwide, citing ongoing fighting since the 2021 coup. Vote counting dates have not been announced. Analysts say the military's move from the battlefield to the ballot box faces serious challenges despite claims of public support. And I will now request Mr. Feingold to join us back in the discussion here. Mr. Feingold, we were talking about this election in Myanmar, I believe just a few days earlier also. Of course, there is political unrest, but how do you see the decision of holding elections in a phased manner? Do you think it will ensure elections to be held in a safe, secure manner as one would expect?
Probably, in addition to security concerns and the tenuous hold that the military has on large parts of the country, even the parts where they think they can hold the voting, I think another factor here is that they want to give themselves some breathing room. If there is a security situation, for example, if there is a disruption to the voting by one of the armed groups that oppose the military, that might give the military time to say, we're going to have to put a pause on this, and their excuse would be instability. That would actually work in their favor. They could say, we're not ready to have an election or a transition in government. So it's kind of like they're building in a hedge for themselves as well. I think another factor here is also, and we've seen this in the last few hours, keeping in mind this is a developing story as they proceed to and begin the actual vote. I think with the enormous, and there is an enormous amount of international attention that is now being focused on Myanmar, an amount of attention that the country has not received despite the ongoing war in recent months or recent years, as there's been focus on other conflicts around the world, such as in Ukraine and in Gaza. I think the generals are concerned about the international reporting. They're concerned about how foreign governments are looking at this. And again, having the phased election gives them time to adjust. And frankly, there's going to be a lot of criticism. And they're realizing that now, because almost all the reporting is saying that the election's a sham. So I think also by having the phases, it allows them to react to the international coverage and inevitable criticism.
Right. Talking about other foreign governments, like you were saying, how do you view the decision of ASEAN states to not send in an observer?
They probably struggled with how to respond, but ultimately decided that they couldn't endorse this election, given the parameters and the limited ability for previous political parties, most notably the party that made up the previous government, to participate, and also the fact that large parts of the country will not be participating in the vote because of the ongoing civil war. So it's disenfranchising many citizens. So I think ASEAN struggled with this, but ultimately decided that they cannot be seen as endorsing this process.
And what's your opinion once again on the fact that they've decided to have the biometric details of all the voters in place? That's definitely going to set a new standard of identifying all the citizens of the country.
On the one hand, when you have a regime like this, they want to be able to control as much information and about individuals or about the news as they possibly can, and using tools like this allow them to heighten the control they have over their own people. So from their perspective, of course, they love the implementation of this technology. Now, on the other hand, their defense is going to be that other countries use similar technology in all sorts of circumstances, whether that's at border control or for voting or other situations. So it works both ways. They probably love having this tool, and they're ready to defend it against the inevitable criticism.
And what's really going to save Myanmar? Trump is saying the situation has been normalized. The ASEAN doesn't want to interfere. But everybody, like you say, knows it's a sham in the name of elections. What's going to save the nation from the political unrest?
It's a great question, given how terrible the situation is, and keeping in mind how undeveloped and what a failed state Myanmar has been for most of the years since it became an independent country after World War II. But we can only go by the precedent, and the precedent was that not long ago, just 10 years ago, the military did step aside for a civilian elected government. They did build into the Constitution that they could retain some seats in the parliament, but generally they did give way. But that only lasted about 6 years until they stepped in again and overthrew the democratically elected government. So again, all we could say is that there is precedent for a group of generals to give way. If it's not this current group, maybe it's the next group that takes power after the current group retires. But that is just purely speculative, and it's not the situation at the moment.
All right, sure. Well, for now, thanks very much, Ross Feingold, for joining me in this discussion. It was nice to have you here. And moving ahead, viewers, let's also tell you some science news. Now, scientists have witnessed a never-before-seen cosmic explosion where a massive dying star split apart and then crashed back together, triggering a rare double blast in space. The event sent ripples through space-time and helped form some of the heaviest elements in the universe. Normally, these massive stars end their lives as supernovas, spreading elements like carbon and iron. Another powerful explosion, known as the kilonova, occurred when two neutron stars collided, creating heavier elements such as gold. This newly identified event, called AT2025 ULZ, appeared to combine both phenomena. Scientists said a single object produced two separate but equally powerful explosions, something long predicted but never observed before. If confirmed, researchers said this could have been the first known super kilonova. The study's lead author called it an eye-opening discovery. That's all we have time for, but do keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Mehta, and you're watching Deep Dive on NewsX World. Today we will be taking a closer look at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's probe into the events of October 7. The outrage it has caused and the potential to change how Israel holds its governments accountable. On the 24th of December this year, the Israeli Knesset passed the preliminary reading of a new bill. On the floor of the Knesset, shouts of shame reverberated across the hall. Opposition lawmakers were seen tearing up drafts of the new bill under discussion, one that seeks to change how Israel conducts governmental inquiries. The visitors' galleries were filled with bereaved families who lost their loved ones on the darkest day in Israel history, October 7, 2023. Amid all this, the Prime Minister's chair sat empty. Netanyahu was addressing a military graduation ceremony while his coalition was passing a bill to establish a national state investigation committee. Take a look at how opposition lawmaker Yair Lapid reacted to this bill.
אתם לא החוקרים. אתם לא החוקרים באסון ה-7 באוקטובר. אתם הנחקרים. זה קרה במשמרת שלכם והוא לא יחמוק מזה. האופוזיציה לא תשתף פעולה עם הפרסה המבישה הזו.
The opposition will not cooperate with the shameful farce. That's what the opposition thinks of Prime Minister Netanyahu's bid to establish a new investigative mechanism. This isn't just about a vote. It's a battle over who gets to write the story of October 7. For decades, Israel had a gold standard for disaster, the 1968 Commissions of Inquiry law. It's simple. The government calls for a probe, but the Supreme Court picks the people. Independent, apolitical, untouchable. That's how Israel handled the failures of the 1973 Yom Kippur War. But this week, that tradition was bypassed. The new bill creates a state national commission. However, the fine print tells a different story. Under this law, politicians pick the panel. If the coalition and opposition can't agree, The Knesset Speaker, a close Netanyahu ally, gets the final say. And the mandate? Well, the commission is actually allowed to investigate. That is said by the cabinet. In other words, the people being investigated are drawing the map for the investigators. So why the change? Prime Minister Netanyahu says the judicial system is biased. He argues a panel picked by the Supreme Court would be a political hit job. His supporters point to the US 9/11 Commission as a model, a bipartisan political party. But critics see something else: survival. More than 2 years since the Hamas attack, more than 70,000 dead in the ensuing Gaza war. And yet, Netanyahu has taken no formal responsibility for the security lapse. The bill even suggests expanding the probe to look at the 1993 Oslo Accords and the 2005 Gaza withdrawal, a way to dilute the failures of 2023 by blaming the ghosts of the past. Away from the political spin, there is the human cost. The October Council, a group of survivors and families, is leading the charge against the bill. Have a look at what they have to say about this bill.
I survived the October 7 massacre in Kibbutz Nachal Oz with my 4 children and my wife. We've had 17 hours of horrifying experience in the safe room with dozens of terrorists running around us, killing, kidnapping, torturing, humiliating our friends and our community. And all I want to have is the security for my children. I want the answers. I want the repair of all the systems that have failed on that day. And I would like to have the lessons learned. And this could only be achieved by a neutral, pure and unbiased committee that will be assembled according to law, and not such a committee that's designed to throw all the responsibility away from the government and help them keep their positions.
Fortunately, here in Israel, there is no need to create a new kind of commission to examine a national disaster. We have the Commissions of Inquiry Law 5729/1968. For 57 years now, we know how to execute national commissions of inquiry, a Va'adat Chakira Mamlachtit. I support a Va'adat Chakira Mamlachtit not to see anyone punished, and not because it will bring back my only son. No, I support a Va'adat Chakira Mamlachtit so that nothing like what happened to my son can ever happen to your son or your daughter or your parents.
The bereaved families and survivors of October 7th want a judge, not a politician. They want a witness stand, not a committee room. The bill tries to appease them by adding 4 family inspectors to the panel. But here's the catch. They can watch, but they can't vote. To the families, it's a symbol, a symbolic seat at the table that's already been set. The numbers, meanwhile, tell the story of a fractured country. The preliminary vote passed 53 to 48, but outside the Knesset, the consensus is different. Polls show 75% of Israelis want an independent state commission. 3 out of 4 people. The opposition has already vowed to boycott the government's probe. They say they won't participate in a shameful farce. This creates a dangerous deadlock. If one half of the country views the investigation as a cover-up, the findings will never bring closure. Instead of healing a trauma, the inquiry might just deepen the scar. Israel is now at a crossroads. On one side, a government claiming it needs a people's commission to avoid judicial bias. On the other, families and critics warning that you cannot bury the truth. The bill still has several readings to go before it becomes a law, but the message is clear. The battle for accountability in Israel isn't over. It's just moving from the battlefield to the court of public opinion. And in this war, there are no easy answers or victories. Join us for a deeper conversation. I request Sasha Machda, who's a political commentator, and he joins us from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Sasha, for making yourself available to NewsX World for this conversation. Let me start with my first question. Do you think this proposed commission about transparency, or is it really a political self-preservation tactic?
I think this is part of a greater battle against the judiciary by the Netanyahu government. This is a continuation of what we've been seeing prior to October 7th, the massive battle taken on against the judiciary with the judicial reform or overhaul, as some people call it, and of course of trying to galvanize the low trust in the judiciary and artificially create this sort of low trust in the judiciary to say that although we've been doing this forever with the State Commission of Inquiry, we cannot trust the judiciary, so we need to find a political committee. And this is part of this battle against it and trying to take advantage of this feeling and create this feeling that there is no trust in the judiciary. So I think this is part of this battle against it, and it is something that is a shame because 75% of Israelis, as you said, they support a State Commission of Inquiry, and the government is trying to pass a national committee of inquiry for the first time. And this is not the time to try something new. If Israel were to change the way it investigates its failures and events like October 7th, it should be done next time before the next failure. Hopefully we'll never reach that situation, but not in the middle of it when we need to draw the lessons from the massive failure of October 7th.
Sasha, can an inquiry of this sort heal the national trauma if half the country rejects its legitimacy?
The problem is that in theory, as you mentioned before, of course this committee would be set up in agreement with opposition and coalition. But the problem is that the opposition, of course, is not going to collaborate with this new committee. They're not going to collaborate in setting up the panel. So ultimately it's going to be up to Amir Ohana, the Speaker of the Knesset, to decide who forms part of this panel, which of course makes no sense for Israelis, that the people that should be responsible and are in great part accountable for this tragic day of October 7th, that they're going to be setting up their own investigators. So I do not believe that this sort of inquiry and this sort of committee could actually heal the traumas of October 7th. This was the darkest day in Israeli history, the largest murder of Jews since the Holocaust, and I believe that it requires consensus and it requires a transparent committee, which in Israel has always been done through a state committee. And I don't think that this has changed, and if it were not to be the case, then October 7th would not really close. The trauma and pain of this day would not reach a circle for the families, and it will be very hard to move on and draw the lessons required, not only morally for the victims to understand why their family members and their loved ones were lost on that day, but also what lessons we can learn and how to avoid this in terms of security, because this can never happen again.
And should Israel really preserve judicial-led probes or redefine oversight after October 7 events?
This is the main challenge undergoing right now. Of course, the way that the country was heading prior to October 7th, it appeared that the judicial overhaul, the judicial reform was going to pass. There was nothing that could have stopped it except for October 7th, of course. And the October 7th massacre put an end to it. Of course, people that had been protesting against each other had to unite, and they did unite, and they fought for the country, and they saved the country, because when no one showed up, it was the Israeli people that put on their army equipment and went down to the south and actually saved this country on their own. But now it appears that we didn't really learn the lessons of that day, and the government has slowly been trying to bring back these judicial reforms, maybe in a slower way. It's called the sausage method, salami method, which is slower changes and ultimately trying to achieve the same goal as prior to October 7th.
And finally, Sasha, how can politicians be held accountable if they are involved in setting up investigations?
Only through total consensus, which of course is not going to happen right now. And that's why it's so important for there to be a transparent committee and for things to be done the way they've always been done. And if we were to change this, it should be after a failure, not in the middle of this failure. And the only way to do this, in my belief and the belief of 75% of Israelis, is through a state commission of inquiry that will investigate everyone's failures, because it's important to take credit for the success as Netanyahu has had after October 7th, but we haven't had him come out and take full accountability and his share of the responsibility for October 7th. So I don't believe that a government selected committee could have this accountability, and I really hope that we're going to see a state commission of inquiry, even though it looks like it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Exactly. Well, anyway, thanks very much, Sasha, for joining me in this discussion. And viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Deep Dive. But thanks for staying tuned to NewsX World for all major news and updates from around the world.